Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Imagine coming home and realizing someone poured a foundation on your property without permission. I bring proof. They laugh, tell me their lawyers can drag it out for years. But one official filing later, the entire neighborhood project starts panicking. What did I file? So this happened a few years back, and I'm still amazed at how perfectly everything worked out. I own about 15 acres of land in what used to be a pretty rural area. When I bought the property, it was mostly farmland and woods, quiet and peaceful. That's exactly what I wanted when I left the city life behind. My property is oddly shaped, kind of like a boot if you use your imagination. The main part where my house sits is pretty standard, but there's this weird section that juts out along what became the main road. When I bought the place, the previous owner explained that this extra bit used to be part of an old access road easement that eventually got deeded to them outright. It made the property boundaries weird, but I got a good price because of it, so I didn't complain. For the first several years, everything was great. I had my vegetable garden, some chickens, and enough space that my nearest neighbor was a good quarter-mile away. I could sit on my back porch in complete silence except for the birds and the wind. It was perfect. Then the developers showed up. The farmland next to my property got sold to a development company. I wasn't thrilled, but I understood it. The area was growing, and the farmer who owned it was getting old. I figured I'd get some new neighbors, maybe lose some of the quiet, but that's life in a growing area. What I didn't expect was the HOA builder from hell. The company was called Prestige Properties Development, and they specialized in those cookie-cutter subdivisions with identical houses and strict HOA rules. You know the type where they'll fine you if your mailbox is the wrong shade of black or your grass is a quarter-inch too tall. Not my thing at all, but hey, they were building on someone else's land, not mine. The project manager for the development was this guy who showed up at my door about 6 months before construction started. He was wearing an expensive suit despite the heat and had this practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He introduced himself and said he wanted to discuss the upcoming development. I invited him in for some iced tea, trying to be neighborly. He spent about 10 minutes explaining how wonderful the development would be, how it would increase property values, and how lucky I was to be adjacent to such a prestigious community. Then he got to the real reason for his visit. He wanted to buy my property. I politely declined. I'd just spent years fixing up my place exactly how I wanted it. I had no interest in selling, especially not to become part of some HOA development. He pushed a bit, offering what he probably thought was a generous price, but I stood firm. I liked my land. It was mine. End of story. He didn't take it well. His smile got tighter, and he made some comment about how my property was going to look out of place next to all the beautiful new homes. I showed him to the door and figured that was the end of it. Construction started a few months later. The first thing they did was put up a fancy entrance with brick columns and a sign that said Prestige Estates in gold letters. Then came the infrastructure work. Roads, sewers, electrical lines. This took the better part of 6 months. Then they started putting up houses, and they were moving fast. Within 8 months, they had about 20 houses in various stages of completion, with more foundations being poured every week. I watched it all from my property, grateful that I'd insisted on keeping my land. The houses were those prefab-style constructions where they can put up a whole house in a few weeks. I'll admit, they looked nice enough from a distance. Not my style, but decent quality as far as I could tell. That's when I started noticing the survey stakes. I'd walk my property line like I did every few months, just checking on things, making sure no trees had fallen or fences needed repair. During one of these walks, I noticed bright orange survey stakes along that weird boot-shaped section that jutted out. I checked them against my survey map that night. They looked close to the line, maybe a bit over, but it was hard to tell without professional equipment. The stakes were in thick brush, and I figured the survey crew knew what they were doing. I made a mental note to keep an eye on it, but didn't think much more about it. A week later, I came home from work to find that a section of trees on that jutting portion of my property had been cleared. Not a huge area, maybe a quarter acre, but it was definitely my trees on my land. That's when those survey stakes made sense. They'd been marking out where to clear, and they'd cleared well onto my property. I was furious. I drove over to the construction office they'd set up in a trailer at the development entrance. The project manager wasn't there, but there was a site supervisor who barely looked up from his paperwork when I came in. I explained the situation. He gave me this dismissive look and said they were working from their survey and everything was fine. I told him I had my own survey and his crew had just cleared trees on my property. He actually laughed and said that my survey was probably old and inaccurate, and that their survey was done by licensed professionals. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. I kept my cool though and told him I wanted them to stop work on that section immediately until we could sort out the property lines. He waved me off and said construction was on schedule and they weren't stopping for some boundary dispute that probably didn't exist. I left and immediately called a surveying company. I wanted a new current survey done ASAP. They said they could get someone out within the week. In the meantime, I took about 100 photos of the cleared area, the survey stakes, and everything else I could document. The new survey came back exactly as I expected. That section was mine, and the development had not only cleared my trees, but had actually started grading the land for a new home. They were planning to build on my property. I went back to the construction office with my brand new survey. This time the project manager was there. I showed him the survey, explained the situation calmly, and told him they needed to stop work immediately, and we needed to figure out how to fix this. His response? He told me that I was being unreasonable, that the survey I had was probably wrong because it was from a no-name surveying company. It wasn't, they were well respected, and that I was just trying to shake them down for money. Then he said something that really set the whole thing in motion. He leaned forward with this aggressive posture and told me I needed to be a good neighbor and work with them on this. Just accept their survey and stop making waves. Then he said, and I remember this pretty clearly because of what happened later, if you've got a problem with the property line, take it up through official channels like everyone else. File it with the county, go through the proper process, but stop coming here and disrupting our work. Then he leaned back with this smug look. Of course, if you do go official with this, just know we've got lawyers who can drag this out for years. Your choice. Be reasonable now or watch this get ugly through official channels. He was basically daring me to take legal action while threatening that they'd make it hell if I did. I stood up, told him he'd be hearing from my lawyer, and left. I hired a real estate attorney that same day. She was great, really sharp, and immediately understood the situation. She looked over both surveys, confirmed mine was correct, and sent a formal cease and desist letter to the development company. The letter demanded they immediately stop all work on my property and begin discussions about remediation. The development company ignored it. They kept working. Over the next 2 weeks, they poured a foundation on my land, an actual foundation for a house. I documented everything, took photos daily, and my attorney added it all to our file. Then my attorney did something that turned out to be the key to everything. She filed the survey with the county as part of the official record and simultaneously filed a lis pendens, basically a public notice that there's a legal claim on the property. This shows up in any title search. She also sent copies directly to every title company in the area with a formal notice that there was an active boundary dispute affecting the development property. I asked her why this was so important, and she explained that real estate transactions live and die on clear titles. Any cloud on the title, any dispute, any question about who actually owns what, that's a red flag for title companies. And they won't issue insurance until it's resolved. That's when things got interesting. See, the development company had been selling these houses like crazy. By this point, they had about 30 homes in various stages of construction, and most of them were already under contract. Buyers had put down deposits, gotten mortgages approved, and were expecting to close within a few months. But here's the thing about buying a house. The title has to be clear. The title company has to certify that the seller actually owns the property they're selling, and that there are no disputes or liens or other issues. It's literally one of the most important parts of buying real estate. My attorney's filing created exactly the kind of red flag that makes title companies nervous. Suddenly, there was an official survey on record showing that part of the development was actually on someone else's land. There was a lis pendens filing indicating an active legal dispute. There were photos showing construction on disputed property. All of it was public record, available to anyone doing due diligence on these properties. The title companies started asking questions. I didn't hear about this directly at first. I just noticed that construction on that one house, the one on my property, had suddenly stopped. No more workers, no more activity. Then about a week later, I got a call from my attorney saying the development company's lawyers wanted to meet. The meeting was tense. The development company had 3 lawyers there. My attorney had me wait outside while they talked initially. When I was called in, the whole tone had changed. They weren't threatening or dismissive anymore. They were worried. One of their lawyers explained the situation, and it was worse for them than I'd expected. The title companies were refusing to insure any properties in the development until the boundary dispute was resolved. Not just the lot on my property, but the entire development. The title company's position was that if the developer's survey was wrong about one property line, how could they trust it was right about any of them? The whole development survey was now in question. Without title insurance, the buyers couldn't close. Banks won't approve mortgages without it. Without closings, the development company wasn't getting paid. They had construction loans coming due, contracts with penalties for delays, and about 30 very angry buyers who were threatening to walk away and demand their deposits back. Some buyers were already consulting their own attorneys about backing out of their contracts. The delays were costing people money. They'd arranged temporary housing, put furniture in storage, given notice at their apartments. Every week of delay was costing them, and they weren't happy. The development company's lawyers made it clear they wanted to settle, and they wanted to settle fast. Their first offer was insulting. They'd remove the foundation from my property, pay for restoration of the land, and give me $10,000 for my trouble. My attorney didn't even let me respond before she countered. She pointed out that the development company had knowingly continued construction on my property after being informed of the dispute. They'd ignored a cease and desist letter. They'd cleared trees, graded land, and poured a foundation all on property they didn't own. This wasn't a simple mistake anymore. This was willful trespass and property damage. She also pointed out that every day this dispute continued, the development company was losing money. The buyers were getting antsy. Some were already talking about backing out and demanding their deposits back. The construction loans were accruing interest on houses that couldn't be sold. The longer this dragged out, the worse it would get for them. Then she laid out her demand. $150,000 for the trespass and damages, another $50,000 for the loss of timber value and the impact on my property's character, full restoration of my property by licensed professionals, a legally binding easement agreement that would prevent any future encroachment, and a formal written apology from the development company. She had documentation showing that the cleared section had included several mature hardwood trees worth significant money, plus the cost to restore the land to its natural state with comparable plantings would run $30,000 to $40,000 alone. But the real leverage wasn't the property damage. It was the fact that every single day this dispute continued, the development company was hemorrhaging money on those stalled closings. The lawyers asked for a recess. They stepped out for about 30 minutes. When they came back, they agreed to everything except the amount. They countered with $150,000 total. My attorney looked at me. I was still processing the fact that my nightmare scenario had turned into a potential windfall. She waited for my signal, and I gave a small nod. We settled for $175,000, full restoration of my property, including replanting of native trees, a 20-foot buffer easement that the development couldn't build on, and the written apology. The agreement also included a clause that the development company would pay all my legal fees. The paperwork was drawn up within a week. The money was in my account 3 days after that. The foundation was removed, and a professional landscaping company spent 2 weeks restoring that section of my property. They actually did a better job than it had been before, bringing in mature trees and native plants that were appropriate for the area. But the best part, the absolute best part, was the malicious compliance aspect of the whole thing. Remember what the project manager had told me? He'd specifically said that if I had a problem with the property line, I should take it up through official channels. File it with the county, go through the proper process. He'd been smug about it, thinking that official channels would take years and cost me a fortune in legal fees. So that's exactly what I did. I went through official channels. I filed everything with the county. I followed the proper process to the letter. And it turned out that following the official process was exactly what destroyed their business model. By filing the survey and the lis pendens with the county, by going through official channels like he'd demanded, I'd created a public record that every title company in the area could see. The official process he'd told me to use was exactly the tool that gave me leverage. He'd essentially told me exactly how to hurt them the most, thinking I wouldn't do it or that it wouldn't matter. The irony wasn't lost on my attorney either. She actually brought it up during the settlement negotiations, pointing out that her client had simply followed the project manager's specific instructions to use official channels and proper processes. We were just being good neighbors and working with them through the system exactly as requested. Once the settlement was finalized and the title companies cleared the sales to proceed, people started moving in. The closings had been delayed by about 3 months total, which had caused real problems for a lot of buyers. The story came out because settlement agreements and lis pendens filings are public record. Anyone doing their due diligence on the property could look it up. Plus, the title company had to explain to all the buyers why their closings were delayed. They couldn't just say nothing, so the buyers found out there was a boundary dispute that held things up. Some of them probably looked up the public records and got the full story. That's how these things spread in a neighborhood, public records plus people talking. The new residents were not happy with the development company. They'd had to arrange temporary housing. Some had to extend their storage unit rentals. Others had rental agreements they couldn't get out of. The delays had cost them money and caused real stress. And they all knew it was because the development company had screwed up and then tried to cover it up instead of fixing it immediately. The project manager who'd been so smug with me, he disappeared from the project about a month after the settlement. I don't know if he was fired or reassigned, but one of my new neighbors mentioned that there was a different person handling the final punch list items on the houses. The neighbor said he'd asked what happened to the previous guy and the new manager had just given some vague answer about personnel changes. My guess is the company wanted him gone once everything became public record in the settlement documents. A few of the homeowners came by to introduce themselves once they'd moved in. One couple mentioned they'd heard about the boundary dispute and said they didn't blame me for standing my ground. Another neighbor invited me to a neighborhood barbecue. Most people were just focused on moving in and getting settled, but the few who reached out made it clear they understood the development company had been the problem, not me. The HOA itself also had issues stemming from the delayed closings. Because of the delays and the bad publicity, several buyers had backed out entirely. That left some unsold houses and an HOA budget that was built around a certain number of homes. They had to adjust their fees and their plans for amenities, which caused more grumbling among the residents who did move in. The development company ended up selling the remaining houses at a discount just to get out from under the project. From what I heard, they lost money on the development once everything was added up. The delayed closings, the settlement, the legal fees, the discounted sales, and the buyers who walked away. Meanwhile, I used part of the settlement money to build a solid fence along that property line. No confusion anymore, no vague survey stakes, no construction crews accidentally drifting over. Just a clear boundary with a small private property sign to make the point obvious. I used the rest to improve my place in ways I had been putting off for years. A new barn, a better chicken coop, a greenhouse for year-round gardening. Because of the buffer easement, I actually ended up with more privacy from the development than I had before. The satisfying part was not just the money, it was the fact that the project manager had told me exactly what to do. He said if I had a problem with the property line, I should take it through official channels, file it with the county, go through the proper process, so I did. I filed the survey, I filed the lis pendens. I made the dispute part of the public record, exactly where title companies, buyers, lenders, and attorneys would see it. And suddenly, the same official process he thought would scare me off became the thing that froze their closings and forced them to deal with me. They could have stopped when I first showed them the survey. They could have apologized, restored the land, and worked out a reasonable solution. Instead, they ignored me, ignored my attorney, poured a foundation on land they did not own, and dared me to make it official. So I made it official. I still live here, happy as can be on my 15 acres. The property value has gone up, the boundary is legally bulletproof, and the development company never bothered me again. Sometimes I see houses in prestige estates go up for sale. People move in, get tired of the fees and the HOA rules, and move on. My place stays the same. Stable, quiet, mine. And if someone ever smugly tells you to take your complaint through official channels, my advice is simple. Do exactly that. Sometimes the official channels are exactly what you need to win. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I have worked in computer security for a very long time. One security policy I am sure most people here are familiar with is that you always lock your computer when you walk away from it. Even if you are an accountant or a receptionist, you still cannot leave your machine unlocked. About 10 years ago, my team used to have a little fun with this rule. If someone ran to the bathroom or even turned their back during a conversation, someone else might sneak over to their computer, open the chat client or email and send something silly like, "Does anyone know the meaning of life?" or some other random nonsense. A lot of teams did this. It was mostly harmless, but it also worked as a lighthearted way to shame people into remembering to lock their computers before walking away. That way, nobody had to report them to security and start the formal reprimand process, which could lead to retraining, write-ups, disciplinary action, and eventually job hunting. Everyone understood it was good-natured, and whenever the messages went out, people usually had a laugh. Then one day a new guy started. He left his computer unattended almost immediately. I introduced myself, shook his hand, chatted with him a bit, and then told him he needed to lock his computer when he walked away. I explained that it was company policy, that he probably ignored it during training, and that it was actually a big deal. I even sent him the documentation because he thought the rule was stupid, which was especially strange considering we worked under the security umbrella. His response was basically, whatever. I shrugged and walked away. Then he walked away too, making a show of not locking his computer. Over his first few weeks, he got multiple warnings from his team and from others, but he was a complete jerk about it. Eventually, the team decided he had received enough warnings, especially since he was starting to gain access to sensitive systems. At that point, he was fair game. Not long after that, I passed him as he was heading toward the elevator atrium, so I knew he was going to be gone for a while. I sat down at his computer, opened his email client, typed a silly message to his team's distribution list, and hit send. As I was standing up, he came walking back. He saw me and demanded to know what I had been doing. I shrugged, said, whatever, and walked away. Later that day, his manager came over and told me that he had explained the situation to his new employee. Apparently, the new guy did not want to play that game and was considering reporting me to security for impersonating him. Really? Okay, no problem. I told the manager, who I was actually on very good terms with, that we would not play the game with his new employee. From that point on, I would follow standard procedures. I got my team and a few others on chat and told them that under no circumstances should anyone send a funny message from his computer if they saw it unlocked. No joke reminders, no harmless shame messages, no game. Just follow the actual standard procedure. Almost 50 security violation tickets were logged in the next 2 days. His desk happened to be near the elevator atrium, the break room, and the bathroom, so there was a lot of normal foot traffic past his workstation. The following Monday, he was in security retraining. We worked in an open floor plan so I could see how angry he was while talking to his manager and gesturing in my direction several times. Not my fault. I had only opened 2 of the tickets. His manager asked me to ease up. I told him I was sorry, but I was just following standard procedure. If I did not report violations when I saw them, I could be held responsible too. The new guy kept his computer locked for the rest of that Monday only. The next day, I walked by his desk and there was his email open for anyone to see, with the new guy nowhere around. He happened to be getting coffee, which was where I was headed to. I told him I had noticed he forgot to lock his computer. He cursed me out and speed walked back to his desk. But the damage was already done. Other people had already opened about a dozen tickets. At some point, the security policy had also changed. Now, instead of retraining followed by write-ups, it was a quick retraining and then straight to disciplinary action. No intermediate write-up stage. He had to attend a meeting with his boss, a director, and some security people. I later found out he had been put on a security-related performance improvement plan. He was gone within a week. No one was trying to ruin anyone's career. But if you want to work in security and you flagrantly violate a basic security policy after repeated warnings, then you probably do not belong there. The next one is an entitled people story. I remember this like it was yesterday. This may end up longer than I expect, and there may be a few typos because I just woke up, so sorry in advance. Anyway, I had done all my due diligence to have my son's 5th birthday party at a public park under the shaded benches. These benches were first come, first served, but they could also be rented. I also wanted to have a bounce house, so I had to get a city permit for that. I reserved 2 rows of benches under the 6-row awning and got there at 6 in the morning to make sure I got an end row for easier access, since it was a children's party. I secured my 2 rows of tables. Another guy showed up to set up for his 1-year-old's birthday party and started putting up ribbon, balloons, and tablecloths on the 2 tables behind me. He asked if I could watch his stuff quickly while he went to the store for ice or something else he had forgotten. I do not remember exactly what it was, but I said sure. I had nothing else to do while I sat at the park waiting until noon for the party to start. My son was with me because he wanted to come early, play at the park, and run around while we waited. That part is important. The next thing I knew, my son was hysterically crying and running toward me. I was freaking out because he was screaming in terror. A woman with an infant and a toddler had been at the playground, and she had a puppy on a leash. My son was running toward the swings, and the dog was able to lunge out and bite him on the arm. He had a decent puncture wound. First, I checked him over and made sure he was okay. Then I went to find the dog and its owner because seriously, why bring an aggressive dog to a park full of children running around? The woman never even came over to me. I had to go to her and she was already rushing to leave. It was a puppy and she said it had its shots. I was angry, but her apologies and the look of genuine remorse made me decide to move on. His wound was minor enough that it did not seem worth a doctor's visit. She had the shot records and we exchanged numbers, so I let it go. I thought that would be the worst thing to happen that day. I was very wrong. My son and I went back to the tables and a new woman, whom I will call Entitled Lady, had arrived. She was ripping all the decorations off the tables that the other guy had asked me to watch. I confronted her and she said she had reserved the tables and that we all had to move. I told her that I had also reserved tables, but only 2 rows could be reserved and any unreserved tables were first come, first served. I explained that the other guy had already been there and had just stepped away to grab something. Because of the chaos with my son getting bitten, that was around the time the other guy came back. I apologized to him for what happened with Entitled Lady and his decorations, which he was now pulling out of the trash. Entitled Lady was angry because she thought she had reserved all 6 rows of tables. Then the insults started flying from her and the small group that had shown up with her. I even showed her the part on our permits where it stated 2 tables. She was angry, but she seemed to mostly let it go. That lasted until the bounce house guy arrived to set up. Entitled Lady came stomping over to me and said, "You cannot have that here." I told her, "Yes, you can. You just have to get a city permit," which I did. She said, "No, I called the park. They said you cannot." I told her, "Yes, you can. It is even on their website. You just have to get a city permit, which costs about $100, and I got one." She wanted to see the permit, but she had been rude from the beginning, so I told her I did not have to prove anything to her. By that point, the parties were in full swing, and she kept trying to send her kids to our bounce house. I told her I was sorry, but I could not allow that because if one of her children got hurt, I would be liable. So that was a hard no. I did not say this, but I probably should have added that if she had not been so awful to everyone, maybe things would have been different. That made her even angrier. Entitled Lady and her group started hurling insults and racial slurs toward the middle table. I think she was angrier at me, but that group was closer, so they got most of her rage. Then, Entitled Lady and the man with her got really nasty. The next thing I knew, there was a full-blown fist fight between people from Entitled Lady's baby shower group and the 1-year-old birthday party group. I do not think the whole groups were fighting, mostly the husbands, but it was still bad. The police were called, the kids were scared. I walked over and said I would give a statement to the police because the guy next to us had not started it. I did give my statement. Surprisingly, no one went to jail. Of course, Entitled Lady had the police check whether I had the proper permits. Once they confirmed that everything I had was legal, all of my stuff stayed. After that, she finally backed down and the insults stopped. But the death stares I got from her group for the rest of the party were unreal. So yes, it was both the party from hell and a party we will never forget. We all laugh about that crazy birthday now. My son is 19. Edit to add, because apparently I need to explain myself. I think the whole thing is a ridiculously funny story now about my son's disaster birthday that year. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and am unmedicated by choice. After 47 years, I have become one with my squirrel brain. I probably do need therapy, but I do not even have the time or energy to make necessary doctor appointments half the time, and not because of this incident. That part is just funny to me. Also, I am sorry, but not really, for posting something that happened 14 years ago right after I woke up. I saw something that triggered this memory in my brain and thought, "Oh, shiny, let me post this while I remember," because I thought it fit the community. I would have posted it back then if Reddit had existed. The next one is an entitled parent story. I am 26, and I have been struggling with my mother's behavior for the past couple of years. She is 56, and lately things have only gotten worse. She has become very emotionally aggressive. She seems to have her own version of reality, and that version is often completely distorted. She also never takes responsibility for her words or actions. In her mind, it is never her fault. For some background, my family has a small business that was run by my father and is now mostly handled by my brother. My mother helped build the company, but she never really worked there full time. Instead, she would often go shopping or meet friends during working hours. My dad never had an issue with this, especially now that my brother has taken over most of the responsibility. She also never learned how to use a computer, so she has no idea what to do when a client makes a purchase. The only thing she is really good at is consulting clients directly, and that is about it. The bigger problem is that she does not seem to have any real goals in life anymore. When we were children, she was busy with us and our education, but after we moved out, she no longer had anything meaningful to fill her days. Now she fixates on small problems and blows them completely out of proportion, turning minor issues into huge ordeals. She is extremely direct, to the point that she struggles to maintain friendships because she has no diplomacy. She confuses being blunt with being honest. She has always been negative, but now it feels completely out of control. She is constantly annoyed with my father and makes sure everyone knows it. In her eyes, all of her life problems are his fault. Despite having a very privileged life, including constant trips, some of them expensive and far away, she remains ungrateful. Honestly, I sometimes think my dad takes her on these trips just to keep her from bothering him. Her daily routine is exhausting to witness. She wakes up at 4 in the morning and spends hours on social media. Then she goes to the office, mostly just to drink coffee. By mid-morning, she takes a nap for a few hours, claiming she is exhausted from working so hard, or blaming health issues that do not seem to exist. Then she wakes up moody, complains, bosses people around, and lashes out at my father and brother over trivial things. By evening, she is back home, does no housework, spends more time on social media, and goes to bed early, only to repeat the same cycle the next day. My dad is frustrated by her lack of discipline. She does very little housework. Whenever he suggests hiring outside help, such as a cleaning service, she refuses because she says she does not trust anyone. Most of my parents' arguments come from housework. Eventually, my dad loses patience and starts yelling because he cannot take it anymore. But then she turns it around and tells everyone that he is extremely aggressive and controlling. When I was a child, she often spoke badly about my father. Because of that, I grew up feeling a strange mix of fear and reluctant respect toward him. Later, I realized he was not as bad as she made him seem. He is a workaholic, but she simply does not want to work. Now she claims that all of us have teamed up with my dad against her just because he has the money. She also insists that other men take care of their wives financially and that my dad is the only one who does not. In reality, she receives around 1,000 euros a month, which she spends on shopping. Somehow, that is still not enough for her. I am honestly shocked by how someone can be so ungrateful for the life she has. Whenever we try to confront her about her behavior, we stay calm and try to give her advice. But the moment we do, she starts yelling and screaming. She says we are all against her, that we do not love her, and that we hate her. Then she bursts into tears, and after that it becomes impossible to continue the conversation. We have been trying to convince her to see a therapist because her behavior is making everyday life extremely difficult. She creates drama over the smallest things and treats everyone with cynicism. I do not want to be around her, but at the same time, I cannot just cut her off completely because she is my mother. The problem is that we cannot even have a normal conversation with her. If we try, she insists that she is just different, but in her mind that means she is quirky or special. I have never heard her take real responsibility for her words. Even when she has been extremely rude to me, my brother, my father, or even clients, she always has an excuse or justification. When she is confronted with advice or a rational solution, she either ignores it completely or responds with something dismissive like, "Shut your mouth," or she starts insulting the person speaking. As a side note, my father is not perfect. He has his flaws too, but compared to my mother's behavior, they feel minor. Honestly, I am worried that she is going to wear him down completely. With the constant stress she puts him under, I am afraid he could eventually end up having a serious health issue, like a stroke. Anyway, thank you for watching.